Good day, everyone. It's natural living with Marks and Son.
Hi everyone!
This is Natural Living, and today we're gonna tell you what yurt is fitting for you.
So we'll talk about what will you use the yurt for, how big should it be, what kind of material should you build it from, all these kinds of things to make you, help you make better decisions for building your yurt. The first question that you really need to ask yourself is, why do you want to build or live in a yurt? So we have decided that we want to live in a yurt because it's such a nice round space and because it's a mobile home.
The next thing you have to consider is the actual use. Do you want to use it for living, or do you want to use it for like a workspace, or do you want to use it for like a shamanic healing tent, or you want to use it for like a communal place for a community? So you have to check out that first.
The next thing what you need to decide is, when will you use it? Will you use it all year round, or will you just use it in the summertime? That also makes it easier to think about what kind of materials you will build it with.
The third thing you should ask yourself is how you will use it. Will you use it like just for sleeping, or do you also want to have a kitchen in it and stuff like this? If you have figured out that, you can think of how big you want to have your yurt.
It basically means how high will you build it, how big will it be, and this could also be that you need to do a bit of research on the law, for example. It could be that your yurt or your living space cannot be bigger than a certain amount of square meters, which then means that it would be easier for you to make a smaller yurt, basically.
The next thing you should consider is the placement.
If you have the luxury to choose where you can put it, like if it's your own land that you can put your yurt on, then you have to consider a few things. You have to consider, for example, the flooding. Is there flooding on your land? Is there a lot of wind on your land? Is there a fire hazard that you need to take care of before you can actually put the yurt on your land? You have to consider also the sun and shade. So the sun cycle is something to take into consideration. How is the earth, basically? Is it very steep? Do you need to build a platform to put your yurt on? The second thing about the placement that you need to consider is, will you put it above the ground? So will you put it, like I said, on a platform? Will you put it on the ground? Or will you put it actually in the ground? And we'll come back to these 3 points later in the video. Also, another part of which yurt will be fitting for you is the climate, the flora and the fauna. First of all, you need to think about the temperature. Is it really a cold place where you're standing? Do you need to insulate your yurt, or can you just build up a summer yurt? These are important things to consider when you're building it.
The second thing is that you have to consider how moist is actually the climate in that you're living. With us here, we live in Europe, and it's mostly very moist all over the year, and it's not like the steppe climate in Mongolia. So we cannot really put up like a Mongolian yurt here in Europe, because it would really have problems with a lot of like mold and fungi. So we have to come up with different materials here in Europe than the people are using in Mongolia.
What you also need to consider are the animals that are living in your area. You have to make sure that you're safe, and also that you don't have any problems with animals. For example, we are living here in the temperate climate, which means that we haven't really got a lot of big animals to consider, but we do have the animals that are like the ants. We need to think about how to make them not come in our yurt, because we don't want them in our yurt, we want them in our garden. Second are, for example, the mosquitoes. This made us decide to make a mosquito net in the yurt. And also the third thing are the mice that are living here. We don't want, because we've decided to insulate our floor as well, this means that we have to come up with a way that the mice don't really want to live in the yurt because it's really nice and warm. So we have to come up with a way to make them stay away from the yurt, or at least to not make it easy for them to come into the yurt.
The last thing to consider here are the plants, and this is the reason why we put a root barrier below the yurt so that the roots cannot grow into the insulation. The next thing you have to consider is the mobility. You can decide if you want to have your yurt like highly mobile or like moderate mobile or not mobile. The highly mobile yurts are mostly like a summer yurt where you have no insulation at all, and you might even have like a pop-up roof that you can just really like open and then it's finished already. These variations are highly mobile, but with the insulation it's most of the times a bit difficult. If you need an insulation for your yurt, then the mobility will most likely become less. And you can also decide to build like a yurt with a like an earth roof where you can grow plants on it, but then the mobility will really go down.
The last thing that you need to consider are which materials are you gonna use for the yurt. There are two things with the materials that we had to figure out along the way, which part will we insulate. For us it was not so difficult, but it did make like which materials to get a bit more difficult. We've decided to insulate the floor, the wall, the roof, just because we live in a climate where it is quite cold. But that also makes finding the materials not so easy. Then we come to the recycling part. So if you want to recycle most parts of the yurts, it means that you need a bit more time than when you just go to a shop and buy the material that you need. So it's always good to find a balance. I think that we did. We recycled the floor. Most of the other parts we decided to buy just because the materials of the yurt that we want to make are very specific. And we want to make it fast.
Thanks for watching, and we hope that we could give you some good ideas and thoughts on the way to design your yurt.
Be sure to check out our other videos, and if you like our channel, please subscribe. There will be a lot more videos coming your way. Most probably around spring we will really start to film how to actually build it up, because we are planning that then it should be sort of ready to go.